New Orleans Saints quarterback Derek Carr did exactly what he needed to do to help the Saints' new offense thrive. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst at WWL TV. And on today's episode, we know that the New Orleans Saints defense won't get a lot of shine this week because the story is the offense, but they absolutely thrived. We're going to break it down by the numbers. We're also going to take a look at Klint Kubiak doing a spectacular job, not just play calling, not just sequencing, but keeping the playmakers on the field. Who'da thunk you keep your best players around, you get good output. We're going to kick everything off, though, with a look at Derek Carr, who did exactly what he needed to do to help this New Orleans Saints offense thrive. We got that coming up for you here on today's episode. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day, and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and is brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app. You can head to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL as well to get $50 instantly when you play $5. New Orleans Saints quarterback Derek Carr was exactly the player that he needed to be, was exactly the player that he wanted to be, and was exactly the player I think New Orleans Saints fans were hoping he would be all throughout the 2023 season, here to open the season in 2024. Now, that's a little bit of an unfair statement because I thought that Derek Carr's performance towards the end of the season last year, of course, also probably met that criteria, but knowing that the Saints were coming back into a brand new offense and all these other things, it kind of changes the way that you're looking at things, right? So that makes perfect sense. So what are some of the things that highlight some of the numbers, which is kind of the focus of today's episode? Tomorrow, we're going to dive into film. Today's kind of numbers, analytics, stuff like that, a little bit of a deeper dive in the New Orleans Saints 47-10 victory over the Carolina Panthers, which is the most that the Saints have ever scored in an opening game, most since 45 points years ago up against the Detroit Lions in 2009. But the Derek Carr numbers here are great, right? 19 of 23, 4 incomplete passes to 3 touchdown passes, almost the same number of touchdown passes and incompletions. In fact, Derek Carr probably could have had a 4th touchdown pass, but Klint Kubiak did something that I absolutely loved that we'll dive into here in a little bit in terms of continuing to go back to Alvin Kamara in the red zone after being, a penalty erased a rushing touchdown. Just a really cool thing there. Derek Carr leading it off, of course, the 59-yard touchdown pass to Rashid Shaheed, which traveled 49 yards through the air, which was an excellent display of his arm strength there, despite actually being hit. That 19 of 23 day was an outstanding completion percentage as well. His highest completion percentage of his, since he's been a New Orleans Saint, right? He didn't have a completion percentage higher than that all of last year. But here are a couple of numbers that I think are very important for Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints. 75 is a good one to remember. 75 yards passing between 10 to 19 yards down the field from the line of scrimmage. So attacking that intermediate area of the field. Derek Carr was 5 of 6 for 75 yards and 2 passing touchdowns in that area. So that's really clutch when it comes down to what you wanted to see from this New Orleans Saints offense. You wanted to see them attacking that intermediate area more. You wanted to see them moving away from the perimeter and maybe attacking the middle of the field a little bit more as well. The Saints did that well, and Derek Carr did that well. Also completed all 6 of his passes that were thrown in the middle of the field for a total of 96 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. That includes that big 59-yard touchdown to Rashid Shaheed as well. So you saw the Saints attack the middle of the field. You saw them attack that 10 to 19 intermediate area. And you saw Derek Carr be able to orchestrate all of that, getting to the line of scrimmage, communicating, we're good, not making play changes, things like that. If they were good, maybe checking out of things if they needed to, directing traffic after the snap, working with Foster Moreau to get his touchdown in the end zone when he absolutely mossed J.C. Horn. I mean, Derek Carr was so, the vibes were so high for Derek Carr that at one point he actually looked at Carolina Panthers cornerback J.C. Horn held up 3 fingers, like West Bank, held up 3 fingers and basically said, I got 3 touchdowns on you. And actually had 2 touchdowns on him because the Juwan Johnson touchdown was pretty much like wide open. But still, I mean, letting him know, like, I got 3 touchdowns on you, your defense. I mean, you could see the vibes were there for Derek Carr all the way through. So efficient with the football, careful with the football, precise with the football, good decision makings, attacking the middle of the field, orchestrating the offense. The Saints introducing all of that motion and everything. That's a lot for you to conduct as a quarterback at the line of scrimmage and know how to take advantage of. On the 8-yard scramble that he had when he also came down and like lowered the shoulder to try to, his whole thing was he's trying to win the hearts of Saints fans there. He wants to show that he will fight for the team, that he'll fight for the fan base, all these other things. I think it's kind of endearing. But all in all, it's a football play, right? And him like going up there and welcoming in some contact, cool, like good to see. He got yelled at on the sideline for it, but so I don't think you'll be seeing him do that again. But I love the idea that he was just like feeding off the home crowd, and it was just looking at an opportunity there to prove something. And the reason why I highlight that play though isn't necessarily because he lowered his shoulder, but the play fake was exceptional on that play to where they fake the play over to the run to the left. He ends up tucking the ball behind. No one follows him on the bootleg. And then that's why he ends up running for 8 yards, is because he has the ability to do that. He could have run in potentially for a touchdown on the Foster Moreau touchdown pass as well. But he decided that, Foster putting his hand up was just something that he couldn't pass up. He told us in his post-game presser. So I thought that everything that you wanted to see from Derek Carr in this game, you got from Derek Carr in this game. Efficient, safe, but still taking risks, still pushing the ball down the field, still being aggressive, but good decision-making, all those other things. It was all there for him. And look, we're talking about a game, right? We're talking about one game against the Carolina Panthers in this situation. And I highlight Carolina Panthers because that's who they played against, not because I'm trying to diminish the success of Derek Carr and the New Orleans Saints offense based on their opponent. I highlighted why that's not worth doing in yesterday's episode, because there are things that are inherent and individual to the New Orleans Saints and their players, Derek Carr included, that allow you to be able to say, okay, there are still important changes now versus what you saw last year from the New Orleans Saints on offense. And so we're talking about one game right now. And so will we see this Derek Carr and this offense for the rest of the season? At a certain point, no, right? Like there's always going to be a bad game and all these other things. Like you're going to run into that. But the expectation is reasonable to have that, hey, if Derek Carr is as comfortable as he looked in this offense on Sunday, that he should be able to manage the game, orchestrate the plays, get in and out of the huddle, do all the things that he's got to do. And I thought he just had a fantastic performance. And I'm I'm intrigued to see him follow it up against a much tougher opponent in the Dallas Cowboys. But again, it's not about following up that performance. You want to win that game, but also just, can you orchestrate the offense? Can you be aggressive? Can you continue to make good decisions? Can you continue to keep the ball out of harm's way and all those other things? Like those individual things that he did against Carolina are the things that I'm most intrigued to see moving ahead. So I think that is the big thing that we're looking for from Derek Carr. But so far, so good in terms of what he showed in that first game. So kudos to Carr, and kudos to Klint Kubiak as well for putting his players in position to be able to do all of those things that we mentioned around, and of course, including Derek Carr. And speaking of that, coming up next, I want to take a look at Klint Kubiak and one of the most important things that he did in the game against the Carolina Panthers on Sunday that no one's talking about. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and without a doubt most fun way to play daily fantasy sports. Here, I'll just explain it to you right off the bat. It's you versus the Prize Picks projections. They're going to pick games and they're going to give you projections, stat projections for players. They'll give you a projection for Derek Carr passing yards and Alvin Kamara rushing yards or total yards. And all you have to do is choose whether or not they're going to come in at more or less than those Prize Picks projections. You do that for 2 to 6 players. You can win up to 100 times your money back from Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. and boom, you're off to the races. And right now, one Caleb Williams passing yard gets you one win every week through September over at PrizePicks. So download the PrizePicks app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL so that you can get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL over at PrizePicks for $50 instantly when you play $5, and you don't even have to win to receive that $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. I love therapy. It's been huge for me. I always recommend it for people that might be seeking it. So if you've been thinking about it, BetterHelp should absolutely be on your mind. Think about it. When's the last time that you really learned to or loved to learn about something? As an adult, sometimes we kind of lose the mysticism around the idea of education and learning and things like that. Was it something lost in childhood, or is that still there? I think it's still there. And I only really think that now because therapy kind of helped me get to that place. And I've turned learning those new things into an entire career. And BetterHelp was a big part of all of that. So I highly recommend it. Again, if you've been thinking about therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's designed to be flexible, suited to your schedule. It's entirely online. It's just ever convenient. So rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp today. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, family. Klint Kubiak, New Orleans Saints' new offensive coordinator, did a lot of things right. But my favorite thing that he did right seems very small, but is massively important. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're going to check out the Madman Tyler Rowland and the Barbershop with Tony Wiggins over at Locked On NFL, your daily double dose of NFL coverage, big takes, great takes, good information, great conversation, all of it you can find over at the new and improved Locked On NFL. Go and check it out today wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The thing that I think that Klint Kubiak did the best on Sunday, outside of play calling, outside of all these other things, is that he kept playmakers on the field. This was such a big thing for me going into this game. I understand in the NFL, you're going to have different personnel groupings. Sometimes you're going to have those 3 wide receiver sets. Sometimes you're going to have those 2 tight end sets. Sometimes you have those 2 running back sets. But one of the things that irks me the most when I watch these teams sometimes is that they'll have an 11 personnel look for first down, and then they'll stick an 11 personnel look on second down, but then it's an entirely different 3 wide receiver set. 2 wide receivers come off, 2 wide receivers come on, substituting like hockey teams, all these other things. This is something that the New Orleans Saints have long been doing, and something that recently, I believe, has caused them some grief, right? Because it's a lot of this player comes off, that player goes on, this player comes off, that player goes on, these players now are coming off, and then these players are now going on. It's just a lot of things that can be confusing. Dennis Allen spoke the other day, not specifically about this, but the idea of overcomplicating football and overcomplicating game plans. And that sometimes it's about, maybe it's the simple things that work. And I loved what I saw from Klint Kubiak in terms of embracing the simple things when it came to keeping his playmakers on the field. If you look at the snap counts for wide receivers, there's an enormous discretion between the top 2 guys and the rest, or even the top 3 guys and the rest. Chris Olave, 48 snaps. Rashid Shaheed, 41 snaps. Cedric Wilson, 27 snaps. Mason Tipton, 15. Bub Means, 6. So you see a big time plummet between 41 and 27. Right? What's that, a split of what, 14? Somebody else out there smarter than me do a little bit of math. But that's a big time drop in terms of what we're accustomed to seeing from New Orleans. And the fact that Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed were out there for 48, 41 of 66 total snaps, including penalties and things like that. Also a really good sign, because there you go. That meant that your best players were out there and your best players were on the field and available to you. And so when you see a game like Rashid Shaheed, putting together, insane amounts of yards in terms of total yards, 166 total yards in this game, 73 of which coming from the receiving game. And then he had an additional 93 when it came to return game and everything like that. But you saw the involvement of him being on the field, Chris Olave constantly on the field. And then you go into the backfield Alvin Kamara played 52% of snaps, while Jamal Williams played 33% of snaps, and a lot of those overlapped in some cases and things like that too. So you just saw the playmakers on the field. And this was such a big thing that we wanted to see from this New Orleans Saints offense coming into this year was, are you going to be able to put your playmakers in position to make plays? And on top of that, would you have your playmakers on the field in the first place, which sometimes was, kind of detriment to New Orleans. Go back to the Andy Dalton days a couple of years ago in Tampa, right? Big time fourth down or third down, whatever it was, big time late down where the Saints needed to, it was a third down. They needed to convert so that they can keep Tom Brady off the field and hopefully lock up a game that the Bucs were storming back in on. And who's running routes? Taysom Hill, great. And then Kirk Merritt. And that was it. It was a two-man route, and those are the two players that were running the route with Andy Dalton as your quarterback. Like, no, the other player that I look at that I think it deserves, that Klint Kubiak deserves a little bit of credit in when it comes to this as well, is Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill constantly on the field, being utilized in a ton of different ways and being utilized in ways that you want to see him getting work over on the offensive side. Played 21 total snaps, and only one or maybe a couple of them were at quarterback. I think only one of them was at quarterback and everything. So he ended up playing at least 19, 20 snaps non-quarterback on the offensive side of the football. Again, well above that 18 snap, non-QB snap average that you can extrapolate from last year's usage over the course of a 17-game season. And so you saw Taysom Hill on the field. I mean, look at the first two plays. I had a great question from one of the Locked On Saints insiders who asked about what my first two play calls would be. And one of the things that I mentioned was, having an outside zone run at the beginning. That way you can build off of that with a play action bootleg, maybe on the next play or something like that. I was thinking about like two plays. And the Saints bested my idea because not only did they run the outside zone run on the very first play, but they did it to Alvin Kamara with Taysom Hill as a lead blocker coming out of the fullback spot to pick up 9 yards. And then what did they do? The very next play, they turned to Taysom Hill from the tailback spot, hand him the football and let him go and get that extra yard for a first down or a couple extra yards when they needed that yard for a first down. And so for me, like that's the kind of stuff that you want to see. You want to see them leaning on Alvin Kamara, then leaning on Taysom Hill, then then they 3 plays later go to Rashid Shaheed for 59-yard touchdown strike on 3rd and 4 because they're all of a sudden that kind of aggressive. You know what I mean? And on a 3rd and 4, Rashid Shaheed still on the field. That feels like something to where, okay, you might have the option to run here and everything like that. Then what did New Orleans do later? On a 3rd and 7, it's a pitch to Alvin Kamara to the right side. They get Eric McCoy, they get Trevor Penning, and they get Cesar Ruiz out in front. You see what I'm saying? Like having the playmakers on the field and putting them in position to succeed, i.e. pitching to Alvin Kamara in that situation where you're getting him in space with offensive linemen out in front of him. Like that's how you're going to win football games on the offensive side. That's how you're going to execute your offense to a winning standard on the football, on the offensive side, I guess I should say. And those are the things that you want to see from New Orleans, is the commitment to keeping their playmakers on the field, the commitment to keeping their best 11 on the field as often as they can. Obviously, you're going to see players check themselves out. They need a breather, whatever, those types of things. But outside of that, like, your 11's your 11. And maybe your 11 on 3rd down is different than your 11 on 1st down, or your 3 wide receiver set, is different on 3rd down than it is on 1st down. Maybe your 3 wide receiver set in the red zone is different than it is between the 20s, things like that. I get that. I get that part, but those are specific game plan situations. The other thing is the persistence, right? Alvin Kamara at one point gets a rushing touchdown to the left side. It gets called back for a penalty. And then what does Klint Kubiak do? He goes back to Alvin Kamara and back to Alvin Kamara and back to Alvin Kamara and back to Alvin Kamara over and over and over and over again until Alvin Kamara gets in the end zone. A commitment to rewarding your playmakers, a commitment to keeping your playmakers on the field, a commitment to putting your playmakers in position to make plays. You can call the plays, you can design the offense. If the playmakers aren't out there, and if the playmakers aren't being utilized properly, none of it's going to matter. Klint Kubiak does not have that problem. Coming up next, the New Orleans Saints defense didn't have any problems taking care of the Carolina Panthers. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at GameTime. There's a lot of things that I love about GameTime, which is the perfect place to go to grab your last-minute tickets. I toggle on all-in pricing. That way, I never have to worry about fees popping up by the time that I get to checkout or anything like that. You can also see views from your seat. They just make the ticket purchasing process so transparent, so much more transparent than any of those other ticket sales spots out there. But one of my other favorite things that I absolutely love is GameTime Picks, where they eliminate all the fluff and only show you their best deals. That way you don't have to cycle through thousands of tickets because, GameTime's got it like that. So I absolutely love the way that GameTime has committed to kind of creating an experience. It's about the purchaser, not the seller. And that's my favorite thing about GameTime. It's why I only use GameTime when it comes to buying my tickets. So take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime today. Download the GameTime app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use that promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time. Let's get it. Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints calling card for years has been their defense, even though the focus this offseason has been on offense. And I think the New Orleans Saints defense looked pretty freaking good up against the Carolina Panthers. Can they keep it going? We're going to break that down here as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here with us. Don't forget, we'll be with you later on today with another episode after we get done with, we got Locker Room, we got DA a little bit later, day after press conference, all that stuff. So we'll do a quick show. That'll probably be like a 10, 15-minute show, because there won't be too much that we'll pick up from all that, but there'll be some good things there. So we'll go live to break that down. And then I'll be with you again tomorrow morning with our film study episode. So I'll give you some of the film notes. If you want to see the actual film study with me, like writing on the screen and stuff like that, join the Locked On Saints Insider program. Can't believe you haven't done it already. 504-285-7473. Just text Saints. Get all the film studies, get all the stuff, get all of my notes from like what to watch for during games, before games, and stuff like that, which included that offensive personnel rotation. Insiders got that early and everything. So just come through, do that. Free for the first 14 days. If you want to stick around, $5 a month after that. Help out the show, support the show, all that. But I promise you get something that's worth it. All right, so look, the New Orleans Saints defense, you can also click the link in the description, by the way. The New Orleans Saints defense was excellent in this game. One of the first numbers that I highlighted over at LouisianaSports.net was 2.9. 2.9 is what the New Orleans Saints defense held Carolina to on a yards per carry average. Typically, you hear defenses kind of talk about like, we want to keep them under we want to keep them under 3 yards per carry. And the Saints did a good job of that up against Carolina. The longest run that they allowed was an 8-yard Miles Sanders run. And that's despite the fact that like Bryce Young got a couple little scrambles in there every now and then. And so it was great to see this New Orleans Saints defensive line and defensive front get some of those stops in the run game. And I know everybody loves to say like, oh, it's the Carolina Panthers, it's the Carolina Panthers. But listen, think about this. Last year, the Carolina Panthers were pretty successful on the ground against the New Orleans Saints. Big days for Miles Sanders, nice days for Chuba Hubbard in those competitions or those contests in which they met last year. And this year, same 2 running backs, that they have a commitment to basically running into the ground at this point because they're in the last years of their contract, and an improved and fully reinvested in offensive line that includes guys like Robert Hunt, who is outstanding as an offensive lineman. And so I posit that as a means to say, like, look, sometimes it doesn't, the opponents, no matter how you feel about them, are they good or are they bad? You struggled against them last year, and then you didn't this year. And so to me, that's a mark of improvement. Does that mean that they're going to be perfect for the next 17 games? No, but they don't have to be either. So that was a big one for me. Alvin Kamara himself rushed for, no. That's not the stat that I wanted to say. So Carolina, this is my favorite. This might be my favorite stat actually of the day. So Carolina ran for 58 yards total, right? 58 total rushing yards for Carolina. That means that the 59-yard bomb from Derek Carr to Rashid Shaheed was 1 yard more than the amount of rushing yards that Carolina got as a team all game long. All game long. The New Orleans Saints surpassed that. Derek Carr surpassed that with 1 throw. Rashid Shaheed surpassing that with 1 catch. So I thought that was pretty cool too, just as like one of those weird things that happened. Carolina's offense was also held to just 193 total yards. The Panthers were only held to fewer than that last year. And again, this was before all of the investments on the offensive line, all this other stuff, before getting their quote unquote X receiver who was like completely blanked in this game, or not blanked, but like barely showed up in this game. They racked up total yardage totals below that only twice last season. So the New Orleans Saints handing the Carolina Panthers a pretty sizable defeat over on the defensive side. Then you get a defensive backs group that brings in 3 interceptions. You got 1 from each safety, 1 from each of the safeties that we saw the most of, Tyrann Mathieu, Will Harris, or takeaways, excuse me. Tyrann Mathieu, Will Harris, and Jordan Howden. Not interceptions, but takeaways, because Tyrann Mathieu forced and recovered a fumble. And then you got 3 sacks from Alontae Taylor. So 3 takeaways and 3 sacks, all from your secondary, basically. Pretty good way to go. And then you had Chase Young, who had 6 total pressures in this game, which led all New Orleans Saints defenders by at least double. By at least double. Like he had twice as much as the next guy and everything. So, and the next guy, by the way, Alontae Taylor with 3 pressures, because all 3 of them were sacks. So just what you wanted to see. And then Demario Davis getting a sack in this game as well, flying up the middle. So it's just exactly what you wanted to see from this New Orleans Saints defense. And if the Saints defense remains not necessarily as good as they were against the Carolina Panthers, but the majority of that goodness, if they can maintain that going into this game against the Dallas Cowboys, going into this game against the Philadelphia Eagles, at the very least, they got a puncher's shot. They got a puncher's chance to win those games, or at least compete in those games. And those are important games. Those are games where the New Orleans Saints kind of showed, okay, here's the concept. Now let's go improve it. And so that's what this one's going to be all about for New Orleans. They also held Carolina to 1 of 10 on 3rd down. I mean, just outstanding. Just absolutely outstanding. So really good stuff from the New Orleans Saints defense on this one. I also want to give three special team shout outs. First of all, I didn't mention Blake Grupe in the live post-game show, and that's on me. 2 50-plus yard kicks in this game, including tying his career high at 57, going a perfect 4 of 4, including another one from more than 40 yards, right? Going perfect 4 of 4 when it came to field goals, and drilling 5 of his 5 extra points. Blake Grupe was absolutely on one. I did a game ball YouTube short at an earlier point today, and I made sure to recognize Blake Grupe as a player that deserved a game ball, right? A special teams game ball. A couple of dog of the day options on special teams for me were Anthony Orji, the linebacker, was in on at least 4 special team stops on kickoff returns. Every single time it felt like when the New Orleans Saints kicked off, and they kicked off a lot. Remember, they scored on their first 9 possessions in this game. It felt like Anthony Orji's number was there, or Anthony Orji's name was coming over the press box PA system, and announcing the tackle from Anthony Orji. So just really good stuff from him. And then how about Juwan Johnson? Like, I think we're so used to now maybe seeing something like this, to where you have a guy like Taysom Hill, who's designated as a tight end, who can catch a touchdown pass. He almost mossed one guy in the end zone. I think it might have been J.C. Horn, actually, considering all the trash talk that was going on. But whomever it was, right, almost mossing a defender at one point in the end zone. And then he almost blocked a punt at a later time. And we're so used to seeing that when it comes to Taysom Hill. Like, oh, that's just Tay-Tay being Tay-Tay. But when it comes to Juwan Johnson, we don't think of him as somebody that typically gets back there to block punts. He was wide open on a touchdown strike, had a couple of nice plays all throughout the game, and then ends up deflecting a punt that turned into an additional turnover for New Orleans. And so a big shout out to him as well. And tomorrow, I'm going to dive a little bit more into the New Orleans Saints offensive line, because I haven't really gotten to dig into that, because I'm still working off of just like broadcast view and first watch. I'm watching the tape as soon as I'm done with this. And then so that will give me the opportunity to be able to come back in tomorrow's episode when our film study notes, and then be able to talk a little bit more about the offensive line. But I just think it was a great win for the New Orleans Saints. It's exactly what they needed from several different areas. They got what they needed from Derek Carr. They got what they needed from their defense. They got what they needed from Klint Kubiak, and everybody as a team performed. It was a very holistic win in this one. Doesn't mean it's going to be like that every week, but you know what? It was like that this week, and that's a good thing to see. Now we'll start to look at what they can do moving forward. All right, y'all, we appreciate you very much, as always, making us your first listen of the day every day. Make sure you come back for tomorrow's film study notes. We'll be live later on today as well as we get back from the Saints facility. For your second listen today, make sure you go and check out the new Locked On NFL, Locked On Pelicans with Jake Madison and Matt Moscona over at Locked On LSU. Appreciate you as always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, as always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing, how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.